So, hey there, welcome to another episode of Authentic Chat with Ryan and Darrin. I'm Darrin, that's Ryan. We're here to chat about what's going on in security, what's happening out in the world, any new things, and we do have a very exciting guest as well. So, hey Ryan, what's up? We actually have something new to talk about this week, and I'm excited because Vanson Bourne has a report out about the financial services industry and the security and passwordless state of those financial services industries. And there's some really cool information that's in there. And by cool, I mean insightful, and yet somewhat not so insightful to those of us that actually understand how these things work. But for those that haven't seen it or those that don't know, fascinating stuff. Ryan, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. This is a report that we commissioned out of HYPR with Vanson Bourne, and they went and looked at the financial service industries, FSIs, which we'll probably throw some more acronyms as we usually do. And there's some really good findings. And the reason why I like these type of reports, it aligns a little bit with like the Verizon DBIR.
Mm-hmm.
It's not partisan. It's not driven anything other than a third party going out, getting data, and coming back and giving us an insight on what they were able to identify and find. And some metrics and that did manifest at a high level. There's going to be a full report, so if anybody wants to get it, we'll either have links or contact Darrin, myself, or anybody at HYPR, and I'm pretty sure we'll hand it out, right? No problem. But one of those scary numbers that was reported, and I know you saw it as well as I did, and we kind of both had a little shock moment, which was the average number of breaches reported annually by the FSIs was 3.4 annually.
Annually.
That's annually. That's every year.
Every year.
These are services that we use every day.
Yeah.
As just people.
That's the average, right? That's the average. So high, low, there's companies that are much higher or higher. Yeah.
It could be even a company that has multiples that offsets everybody else.
Right.
It's a little, so that's a little scary. But another good number that came out of that was that we got an average cost of an authentication related breach. And now there's actually a value, right? There's actual dollar value. And if the average of that is 2.19 million, that's a pretty hefty sum for having to mitigate a breach.
Yeah.
And what can you do to prevent or be proactive or offset that cost up front versus accepting it as kind of like a fee?
we're just going to pay this. It's going to be great. Get about 3 or 4 breaches a year, but no worries. We put it in the budget. No, not the best strategy, people. I'm just saying. But what was interesting about the report was it didn't just kind of go into the broad numbers. It did actually break it down and say these are the attack vectors, and it told you which ones. Now, obviously, the big one is the one we know about, which is phishing, right?
Definitely not a shocker.
Not a shocker.
We can correlate that with all the other breach reports that get done that are of third parties that, once again, Verizon's, we could probably even look at even some Mandiant reports and a couple others, that phishing is the most common and most successful, right? It's a very inexpensive way now, which with all the automation tools and everything else, to just send, it's almost like a send and forget. And then lucky when something, bites on the hook. There was also, what second list was malware. The third one, though, that got me was it's credential stuffing or brute force. So that is specifically talking about reusing something that is already existing out there. We can play the dark web, deep web, whatever. Ooh. There's a whole lovely little marketplace of 3+ billion username and password combinations. Great library. And then the next on that list was push notification attacks. So we've had some conversations in the past, I think even on previous episodes, where we talked about, push fatigue and lapsus and how they were able to find success. And that was actually an approach that has been used for many, many years. It just happened to get a little bit more limelight in the media from lapsus, where they now labeled it push bombing. And this is really push fatigue. I don't really like that label. I'll be honest. I really don't like that label of push bombing, because I think it is push fatigue. It's just send messages. And we know the end users are fatigued from just getting notifications, and they'll accept. So I when we look at those type of things, the attack vectors are the same. I'm pretty confident we go to 2023, we do another, commission report like this. Unless passwordless authentication, which we're very biased, unless that is adopted with, phishing resistant technologies, we're going to see the same exact results. I don't see this report changing in 2023.
I hope it does.
I do, as long as, we see our industry adopt the phishing resistant technologies. And there's also a lot of other principles and frameworks. We've talked about it in the past where zero trust was a hashtag, right? And we were walking around trade show floors and every vendor in their world had, zero trust marketing put up, but it hadn't really become a reality. And along with passwordless and phishing resistant and everything else, zero trust is now becoming a reality, that principle and those frameworks. And it's amazing where it has come to, because there are people in this industry that have spent a lot of time focused solely on zero trust to get that adoption.
That brings us to our guest. And I'm super excited, mostly because I love being surrounded by people that are way smarter than me about stuff, because then it makes me look way smarter than I am. But with us today, coming from Optiv, the man who actually wrote a book about zero trust security, look it up, go find it. It's amazing. Jerry Chapman. Welcome, Jerry.
How's it going? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. I'm digging the headphones. Nicely
Thank you.
done.
Appreciate that.
Nice. So I don't know if you had a chance to look at the report, but some of those stats are probably not surprising, even the ones we just mentioned. That it's phishing, right? Companies are getting breached, and phishing is the number one reason.
Not a surprise. No, I listened to some of this you're talking about, and I'm shaking my head, because I think, Ryan, you nailed it. Regardless of what happens in 2022, 2023, we're going to have the same conversation, right? Phishing and the malware. And I actually love that term, push bombing. That's awesome. I love that term. I get it. It's fatigue. I will say this though. How much time as an industry do we really spend educating people, right? Because phishing, push bombing, whatever the credential stuffing, I'm not going to talk about passwordless yet, but we'll definitely get there. I know that's a big topic for you guys. It's a big topic for me when I talk about zero trust. But the first thing that came to mind, and everything you were just talking about, is like, we don't spend enough time in industry really educating our end user community. We don't. And that just becomes, in my mind, a bigger problem, because regardless of what we do on the back end with security and security controls and all the things that we talk about, I love MFA, right? I'm an identity guy. I talk about it all the time, right? But regardless of what we do, if we don't educate and really spend time on, hey, as a user, if you're getting all kinds of notifications and you're not really doing anything, should I think about that? As opposed to just saying, okay, right? That's a big thing for me, right? Is because I talk about education all the time. If I'm not talking about education and teaching our users, what does it mean? Phishing, malware attacks, because what, as a user, I clicked on a link and guess what? I got malware, and the push bombing. I love that. I'll call it push fatigue for you, Ryan. How's that?
I appreciate you going out and siding with my lack of enjoyment of the media's terminology of an existing threat. I think that's where that's where I get where it tickles me a little bit, right? It was a known threat, and then not until recently did they then come up with some marketing term that, we have history in our industry of what seems to be kind of fear driven. And because of that label, now when you say push bombing, that sounds very fearful. That sounds very frightening. So I kind of try to balance myself a little bit on, like, where do we kind of over abuse? And if we are educating, or we're trying to educate our user communities, which language do you want to use?
Well, I can say the same thing with zero trust, man. We've been talking about zero trust for 10 years, truly. I mean, and it's become, we don't want to talk. I've walked into boardrooms, or walked into CIO's office, and they're like, if you say zero trust, you can walk away. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. let's call it adaptive risk security controls. I don't care. You pick the name, right? Because to your point, Ryan, it's just become marketing. And at that point, it's how do we address it? How do we move forward from there? And in my mind, it goes right back to the beginning of this conversation. We got to educate. What is it we're trying to accomplish? What are the users and what are we going to do, man? That becomes the driving force. Because if we don't do that, look, man, I don't care. If we don't do that, it doesn't matter if I get zero trust and I do passwordless and I start implementing all these additional security controls that just continues to elevate, continues to drive security. The number one weakness or impact to what we're doing is still our user community. And until we help them become a part of the solution, so I won't say they're part of the problem. I think they're part of the solution. And make them part of the solution, we're going to continue having this. I will tell you this, right? In 2025, you'll do another report, and phishing and malware and whatever the new push bombing becomes is going to be right on top of that list. That's what I think.
Well, and one of the reasons I think, there are so many words that they're trying to marketize them is exactly your point. If we can make it so that it's impactful to the user that isn't technology driven, to that average user, look, it's not fatigue. I don't want to say that you're fatigued because I don't want to insult you with that. So how about they're bombing you with these things? Isn't that scary? You should do something about that. Right? Whatever, to your point, whatever makes the impact, whatever gets them to realize, hey, don't click that link. If it isn't coming from someplace don't click, or if it is and you hover over it and it says nothing of the company information, hey, don't click it. What do you think? Until we make that part of their psyche, part of their mentality, it's going to keep happening.
That's right. I totally agree. Yep.
And it's kind of timely too, because you're advocating obviously on user education and helping our community. Just what I think in July, we're in July, right? Yeah, in July, the White House just the White House just had a cybersecurity summit, and it was about how do we start educating even at lower levels of our education process. So looking at, do we start putting things into high schools, into junior highs, and how do we start actually bringing up our youngsters into a more digital awareness, a more cybersecurity awareness type context. Also, you can tie it back to not only educating our user communities, but we also have a huge talent gap, right? We don't have enough IAM people. We don't have enough pen testers. We don't have enough of all these security professionals. So how do we take that on top of getting people to adopt these new principles as well as being educated? That is a pretty big challenge in front of us.
Do we really want to go off this cliff?
We can. Who's this is I will drive us together like Thelma and Louise for that reference.
I look everything you said, right, is I think you're dead on, right? I look at what we've done traditionally, right, to bring people into the industry. I've been in this industry for well over 25 years, right? I look at what we've done with bringing people into the industry. I look at 3-4 years ago. I was working at I was volunteering at a local high school, and just listening to some of the students and seniors that were graduated that were doing things like hackathons, right? As a senior in high school, the capability or the ability to bring that kind of person into the industry is just imperative, right? Let's not, listen, I'm going to first say I am 100% an advocate of go to college. Let's just say that to begin with. But let's just be clear. Some of these people that go into some of the, they may go to school and then they lose interest or they go a different direction because, quite frankly, you get into some of the higher ed and it might burn them out, right? Because now they're paying all this stuff or education and whatever it happens to be from that perspective. And I'm not going to get onto the education side or politicize any of that, but just, you potentially lose that interest if they start going down another path. So we just have to your point, Ryan, I think we have to rethink all of that. I think we have to rethink, how do we bring these people in? How do we bring these highly motivated individuals and intelligent people that just have some capabilities that we in the security industry desperately need, right? That's one side of that, right?
One of the challenges I see too, to your point, right? You go to a higher learning facility, you have so many opportunities now to be in technology in 100 different ways, more than you could even 4 years ago, right? If you want to be a game designer, if you want to be, those kinds of things where there's so many, if you're interested in technology as a whole, you might go down a path that wouldn't lead you to security because that's interesting or exciting. So
let me ask you a question. I fell into security. I mean, I was doing networks and network security. I was doing, was building the networks and all that stuff, and really good stuff. But I literally fell into security. Did either one of you just say, "Oh, I'm going to come out of college and I'm going to do cybersecurity"?
So I have an interesting story. So I may be anomalous to this question, but I spent most of my first half of a career as a professional performer, actor, dancer, singer. And at one point I said, I want to be a father. I want to have kids. I want to, build a family. I want to stay stable. I don't want to travel as much as far as acting goes because you're finding a new show every 3 months or whatever. So I chose technology. I chose IT. I chose learning how to do server admin because I looked at it and said, there's a career that will never go away. It will only expand in its scope. There's a career that will continue to drive me to have to think more, to have to try more, learn more, and go further in my understanding of how it works, as opposed to becoming stagnant in my understanding of how something works. So I chose it on purpose. I'm probably anomalous in that way, though, because I was also much further into my adulthood when I did it. So,
okay.
Yeah.
How about you, Ryan?
My story came a little bit different. I started with networks. I started with mom and pop shops running systems.com, and then really got heavy into application development, application performance. And then I had a moment where it was like, there's something that needs to be done, especially around security and MFA and authentication. And I, at the time, it was identity was the new perimeter. So before that, it was software's eating the world. And then I jumped in after software was eating the world. And I noticed that, where identity was starting to drum up like 10 years ago. And it was like, this is going to get bad. Like, this is going to evolve. There's going to be a lot of problems. And MFA was that first, like adaptive auth and everything else was that first foray into it. And seeing what has just transpired over the last 10 years alone has shown this evolution, has shown the problems, has shown the increase of threats, breaches, and everything else. And it kind of piggies back to, okay, well, software is eating the world. What's that mean? More applications. What's that mean? More identities, more access points, more information. So it just ends up being this big giant spiral. And I was like, now I've made it my mission. My mission in life is to, let's get rid of the shared secrets. Let's be a part of this end goal. And that's where I've been. So then we take in your aspects, being that you are an author of a book, and looking at, why Darrin and I sat here going back, hey, look, we've been talking about zero trust. We got at the trade shows, kind of misbranding. I actually think it was a misrepresentation, and probably the reason why there was a challenge to get momentum was because of that initial onslaught of ZTA came out and everybody put ZTA on it. Vendors that shouldn't have had zero trust on their booths had zero trust on their booths just to try to pull people in. And I actually think that was a negative side effect for the principles and the frameworks and everything else. But now, as you have, participated and wrote a book, and this is where you've been spending a lot of your time in, tying this full circle, right? Back from your identity background, your security background, and then piggybacking that into the zero trust. There's a lot of aspects of that principle and those frameworks that get a lot of protective barriers along the way that mitigate a lot of what I was talking about, software eating the world and identities floating around all over the place. where if you were to say, or you could associate like a protection mechanism with an identity, and let's say, like, I wouldn't put it into phishing, but you have things around brute force and you have things around, like, say, password spray attacks and man in the middle, where ZTA can help actually start mitigating some of those things.
So, I mean, I think that was a question.
Yeah, 'cause I do that a lot. So sometimes I go into rants and then I just pause and make people look at me like, that was a question. I had no idea. You don't know where periods and commas go in your words. So
Ryan, I do that all the time, so I get it. That's why I was able to recognize that.
Ryan went to the Christopher Walken School of Punctuation.
Absolutely, I love that. You know, I think about that, and I had a conversation very recently around if you think about some of the password sprays, some a little bit of phishing, but more of the brute force attacks, and quite frankly, where some of the breaches have been over the last couple of years, where identity has played a huge part of that conversation, and has played a big component in the breach and how, you know, that the organization was breached. The conversation I had a little while ago, I would say even earlier this week, was if we can improve a user experience, and I know this is going to eat right into you guys' hands, so don't take it any way other than just, you know, but if we can improve a user experience, make the user understand things like, what does passwordless truly mean? Not that passwordless is, oh, we're taking the password away, that means security goes away, right? We're changing the authentication process, which gives us the ability to do two things. One, it gives us the capability to improve your experience as a user. And then secondly, implement additional security controls on the back end that provide some of those elements for zero trust. And how do I import it, or how do I gain access to more protected resources, and how do I step up or uplift the authentication or authorization necessary to get into those environments? That's the conversation from that I've been having a lot lately. Is, you know, we just really, you know, we want the user to be more on board to stop some of those attacks and stop some of those things. And the only way they're going to really be engaged is if I'm not entering my password 20 times a day. That I'm sorry to use that, but that's really, you know, it becomes fatigue, right? Which ultimately changes that user experience, which says to the community, look, I don't want to enter my password 20 times a day, because, you know, why? Or it's, I enter my password once and then I get 20 push notifications, push bombing, right, on my phone, because I've got some, you know, I've got an authenticator or some other, you know, app on my phone that's allowing me to say, yep, step up, step up, step up, step up. I think that's a part of the conversation. It's a big part of the conversation to stop some of those types of breaches. And it goes to two things, and I haven't changed this message, and it goes back to exactly education, right? And experience, because those two things are going to, and that supports a zero trust architecture in my mind. And it just, oh, I could get passionate about this and talk about this all day long, but it just makes the capabilities for enhanced security controls. And we talk a lot about enhanced security a lot at Optiv, right, when it comes to zero trust, but enhance the security to support whatever it is they need to do to protect those assets. Now, I think I answered your question, Ryan, but I'm not sure.
Well, you know, you did a better job at answering than I did asking, so you're winning there.
Got it.
Usually Darrin does all the asking because that's how I form questions.
I'm just over here eating a zero trust taco. I'm good. Had one of those at a convention once. Don't have them.
I don't know that I would want to.
How do you make it personal, right? Because I think what's interesting to me is that we do a lot of tooling, even calling ourselves that. We do a lot of tooling to protect the users from themselves. And then there's a lot of tooling out there to exploit the user as best as they can, obviously, on the other side of that. So there's a lot of this tooling around the user, and the user tends to be not engaged, hence the phishing, right, being the attack. How do we make it personal for them? Or is there a way to make it personal for them outside of causing pain or fear, right?
Technology, I'm sorry, Dan, technology is not going to do that.
Yeah.
Technology can't make it personal. So the question, and I'm not going to get too deep in this, but the question is, well, who makes it personal? That's an organization conversation,
Hmm.
right? That's an organization allowing the user or the user community to be part ownership in what they're doing, to bring them into the fold, right? That's how it gets personal. Because listen, technology is technology. And if I'm pushing a button on my phone, or if I'm, on my Surface or my laptop and I got to do something crazy, that's just technology, man. And that's not personal, right? Even to those middle schoolers who have those smartphone devices that has to do passwords, right? Or has to use passwords in high school or even in higher ed, right? It's got to become an ownership thing, a part ownership in the conversation. That's, in my mind, Jerry's mind, that's how it becomes personal. Now there's a lot in this mind, so keep that in context.
Well, and you pointed out something, my son, 14, entering high school, he's at that age of everything is about technology and digital and so forth. And he doesn't get the concept of the expansion of risk. And what I mean by that is, he might give somebody his email address and okay, now they have a lot of information about you. Or they can at least look up a lot of information about you. Did you know that? No, they can't do that. Yeah, they can, right? It's
Right.
it's that understanding of the risk too that doesn't exist because we insulate ourselves within our own technology. We allow for password caching. We allow for these simple solutions to make us less secure for our own convenience, as opposed to coming up with solutions or using solutions that would make it more secure at the same level of convenience. That's a challenge. It's a challenge of mentality.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. That is a challenge mentality. It was, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it easy, which is why I go back. Listen, I preach the same story. It doesn't matter. I go back to the user experience.
Hmm.
If you can make the user experience better and secure,
Yeah.
then they're going to want to do that, right? We had an organization. I won't tell you the type of organization. I won't tell you anything other than we had an organization that we did work with. We did a zero trust thing with, and within that organization, highly highly uh, uh, contentious application or customer base that ultimately, if you interfered with their work, you were costing them money, and therefore security was a secondhand conversation because it interfered with their work.
Mm.
Right. So doing zero trust with that organization, forget it, right? The conversation's over because you're already telling them zero trust, we don't trust you, right? That's back to that marketing term, right? But once we started having a conversation and started talking about, what can enhance that user experience and still give the security team the capability to support it, it changed the conversation. Right. And you guys will love this. But I talked about passwordless to their document repository as an example. And it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Okay. If we can take that away, take that password process that takes up 90 minutes of their time over a course of every 3 to 6 months, depending on password policy, right? And now they got to call the help desk and they got to do all this passwords and all this stuff on devices, right? Now they're pissed off, pardon my language, that they have to do all of this. And then like, well, why are you affecting me like this? Make this better. And going down a better passwordless experience gives them some capabilities to do better, right? And then the user community says, oh, I can do this all day long. And now from a zero trust perspective, if I'm doing a simple push notification to go from segment A to segment B because I need to, right? Or multi-factor or step-up authentication or whatever you call it, because they're getting to a more secure resource, it's a much easier conversation. and a lot less friction and a lot less pushback to the security team to do the things they need to do. Now, why did I tell you that story? Darren, you asked a specific question. It's just a great story because it goes back to user experience and enhancing security and bringing zero trust into the mindset and educating. Come on, everything I've been talking about. Listen, I'm a broken record. I'll say the same thing every time.
But it's the things people need to hear because, like we said, the reports are the same every year. You know, user education is a huge problem, or we wouldn't have phishing as number one.
That's right.
That's just it. Well,
the other side of it, I mean, the other side of this, I'm going to kind of keep it going because why not? It's fun to have.
I dig it.
I'll keep triggering Jerry to restate the same thing over and over again.
Just poke the bear.
Well, you know what? And it's just kind of happening as we're having this conversation, and we're talking about like year over year, the reports. The only thing that's changing is the size of the number, right? It's just increasing. More companies, more application, more breaches. It's just the quantity is growing and growing. Ever since I have gotten into software and even in security, we have all advocated for education in some form or fashion. So it's almost like the same broken record for that, at least since I've been around for the last 10 years, to constantly advocating for education. But we're not, it seems like we're not moving the needle. Because if we're not getting businesses, or we're not getting people to see that as part of the glimmering hope of change. So I think that's a bigger problem for us as an industry to try to figure out, all right, well, where are we missing the mark on getting that nudge of education? There was even the group of CISOs who did the DBIR. You know, some of it has to do with that. When I first got into security, it was that damn user. It's the damn users. It's the users. And if you think about it, users now carries a negative connotation to it. And that is, I don't agree with that. Like, I think as technologists and as people who deliver the technology and software and user experiences, that's on us as vendors, as product producers, as stewards of security, that we don't let that negative connotation, that we are there to enable the customers. We're there to enable the users. So where do you think that we could possibly move that needle? And it could be anything, just pick anything. One topic that you think that would help us as an industry possibly get that user education where businesses make that a priority.
Well, if let me ask you guys, and you know this answer, so it is what it is. How proliferated is Cybersecurity Month outside of the security teams in an organization? Seriously.
Oh yeah, no, nobody in my family that's not in tech knows that there is even a Cybersecurity Month.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody in my family knows.
Right. So the question becomes, you know, in cybersecurity, we're talking about security, but we want to enable our user community. So why doesn't our user community who's not in tech understand, well, October is Cybersecurity Month? Right, it becomes, let's put some marketing hype around that. That would be fun. Think about that for a minute. The entire cybersecurity world, in creating a marketing practice or a marketing thing that just blasts across the globe to say, this is Cybersecurity Month, and that's what this means. How cool would that be?
That'd be awesome.
I'm all for getting rid of Halloween and just going cybersecurity. Let's just get all those marketing dollars off of Halloween and let's just turn it into cybersecurity, man.
Well,
It just,
I think one of the parts that, it's good. One of the parts that I think we have to go with that is taking away the stigma of security too, for those that don't understand it. You know, oh, security, that means it's going to be harder, it's going to be more complicated, it's going to make more time out of my day, right? We have to take away that stigma.
That's right.
Because that could be part of that pushback of wanting to learn is, no, because if I learn it, then I have to use it, and I know it's going to be hard and it's going to suck.
You know, I say this all the time, though. Think about something for a second. In 2016, I believe it was, Apple came out with the iPhone 8 or 10. I can't remember which one. I think it was which one came out with, I think 10 was the Face ID, right?
Yeah, I think it was iPhone X. Yeah, it was 10.
Yeah. So they came out with the Face ID in 10, right? Took away the Touch ID. and they started marketing the commercials. Think about the commercials that Apple did with the Face ID. They had the painted faces and all this different stuff that it was going to recognize you. They made it cool. Think about how cool that seemed. Like, hey, I get Face ID. And Apple put this huge marketing came and spin around it. They didn't talk about it from a security perspective, but people latched onto that. And that drove that moved the needle. And now we as a society have gotten very used to enabling some of those biometric security features on our devices so that we can have more security. Right.
I would actually counter that though.
Okay.
My life, like as a security professional, why would I use Face ID in the first place? That was a straight convenience factor.
But that's right.
But that wasn't driven by security uses. It was kind of straight convenience, great experience, which I think I walked right into your little door.
I opened it up and said, "Come on in, Ryan."
Which is right. The main driver. Yeah, props to Apple on that. So if we're brainstorming how we would want to do that one thing, because I like your idea. I'm bought and sold on the idea of saying, hey, let's find a way. Maybe we need to go run out to a bunch of corporations and champion, like, hey, let's all fund up and figure out ways to do these marketing type situations for some security topics specifically, and not have it be vendor driven, right?
Oh,
Because if you put vendor names on things, then people are gonna be like, well, it's biased. But have a coalition of companies in doing it as a contribution. I think there's some couple of organizations I just need to go double check that are out there. But how do we make it bigger, broader, more mass to, I think, what you were describing, Jerry?
Yeah. That's exactly it. I think that's the conversation. I don't know how to do it. I'm not Apple. I don't work for Apple or Microsoft or any of these providers of these wonderful smart devices that we use that have impact to what we do every day. But I think that's bringing Cybersecurity Month to realization is just fundamental, right? And I think that's that might move the needle. I don't know. Again, this is just brainstorming, right?
Yeah, but
it's about having ideas.
Insiders. Yeah,
sorry.
It needs to stop being a month about insiders, right? About just us celebrating us. It needs to be something that we can all celebrate together.
That's right.
Excuse me, Darren. I like celebrating us.
We can still celebrate us, but everybody else gets to join us.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Jerry, thank you so much for coming on. I truly appreciate it. Again, if you haven't seen or read the book, go get the book. It's Zero Trust Security.
So because you brought it up, Darren, I'll talk about it. It is Zero Trust Security, an enterprise guide. You can get it on Amazon. You can go out, and it's on Kindle. You can go out and get it off of our publisher site, which is Apress. You look myself or my co-author Jason Garbus up. We'll certainly talk to you about it. We love talking about it, and we're not hiding. we're out there. So absolutely.
Right on. Jerry Chapman, thank you so very much. Ryan Rowcliffe, good to have another fellow bald guy to talk to every day. Jerry's hiding it with the wonderful hat, but know that you have 3 perfect heads on this call. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.